Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Hello, everyone. In the studio today, we have Nick Musica. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Howdy, Sandra. Thanks for having me.
Oh, excited to have you here. Hey, today we're going to be discussing psychic animal communication. And if we have time, I'd like to delve a little bit into a conversation on intuition.
Great.
I believe that you also get into some intuition kind of things.
I do.
You have a really interesting story to share. If you can talk a little bit about how you navigate between being a search engine optimization expert, which I actually do know what that is now that I'm doing podcasting, an SEO, to being a plant medicine enthusiast and a psychic animal communicator. In my mind, there's a significant gap between those mindsets, and I believe that you're doing them all simultaneously, if I'm not mistaken.
That is, all true for sure. Yeah, so I've been working in the SEO field since 2003. I've been running an agency since 2019. But there was this thing that showed up for a long time for me. For a very long time since like my early 20s, I was living snippets of dreams. So it was really nothing significant. People have had dreams and they go, I had a dream, don't get on the plane. It was nothing like that. It was normal everyday things. It was, I'm making up this scenario, but it was a random dog on a random corner in a random city. And then the next day, week, month, whenever it is, I end up driving by this random dog in this random city on this random corner that I'd never been in. Right? So that thing was present for a very long time. And I just didn't know really what to do with it, what any of it meant. And then in 2017, and I've been doing, SEO this entire time, more or less, or schooling or whatever it is. I decided to figure out, well, what is this thing? And I wanted it to be nice and tidy and wrapped up in a little box, right? Just give me the answer. It wasn't lucid dreams and it wasn't deja vu. I went to a spiritual teacher and his feedback was, I think something's tapping you on the shoulder. And I thought, man, that is not the nice, neat little answer that I wanted. And that started opening the door for something else, something way bigger. Around the same time, I started a relationship with San Pedro, which is a psychedelic cactus. So that opened things up as well. And with this spiritual teacher, I started to work on meditation once a week. And, I was inconsistent for a long time until the animals really showed up. I mean, I was like once a week, but then I would miss a week or two or the month or whatever. But then I would be, it's like almost like binging on it and then coming back.
I get it.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's a discipline like anything. Yeah. About a year ago, a little more than a year ago, my wife and I went to this psychic fair here in Carlsbad, California. We did a loop around, didn't see anyone we were interested in sitting down with. And then we went back the opposite way. In direct line of sight, there was a young lady whose name is Adelita. And I said, hey, Jewel, what do you think? You want to sit down with her? And my wife said, that sounds great. Why don't you go first? So I went first. For 15 minutes, I went in the first 30 to 60 seconds, whatever it was pretty darn fast. And she starts by drawing this heart. And she says, this is either a formal romantic relationship or it's an animal. I'm sort of catching up. Like I'm sitting down with a medium. I've never been with a medium before. And it really wasn't in my belief system. Like it just wasn't a thing for me. And then the first thing she says is, you did too much. And I feel what she's saying more than just hearing it. And immediately I know that it's Henry. Henry was my cat who was 22 when he passed. And the last 2 years of his life, he was back and forth to the vet, taking, doing the test, the blood work, essentially treating the symptoms of old age for an animal, which is, in hindsight, it's really treating the symptoms of letting go for the human, really. And so the summary of you did too much was spot on. As I'm really starting to comprehend that I'm having a conversation with my past cat through this woman, she continued, because that's what she does. And she said, they're now showing me Dr. Dolittle. They're showing me that you can talk to animals and it's going to be easy for you. And I thought, man, I never heard anything more truthful in my life. And I really had no reason to think that. No reason to think it at all. Other than those dreams, like nothing out of the norm, I would say, showed up for a very long time. But when she said that, I thought, that's totally spot on. Yeah. And so I went home And I did my normal meditation. I was pretty decent at it at this point. And I tuned into my cat Chucky, who just showed up. Almost immediately I get this bright white light, the type that you would read about that's associated with like spirit guides or angels or some high level being. And I thought, no, there's no way that's my cat. He poops in a box. Sometimes he poops on the floor next to the box or someplace else, but it's not him. My cat is not a higher level being, little furry thing running around. And so I called her up and I said, it's not working. And it's certainly not easy like you said it was going to be. And her response is, you're expecting things to show up in very specific ways, and that is not how this works. Just be the channel for the information, let it come through. What you get is what you get. All right. So I decided to give it a second shot. And I buy animal communication books. You'd be surprised how many there are out there. My library has totally changed. And I book a couple animal communication sessions with folks who actually do what she said I'd be able to do. I want to see how it actually looks, how it feels. I want to be the recipient of. And one day, right before this session is about to begin, I get up from my dining room table to come to this computer for a Zoom session just like this. And when I stand up, I get this very quick visual of Return of the Jedi. And it's the end scene where Obi-Wan is standing next to Yoda, and they're the ghosts of the two characters. And I'm like, oh man, this is Chucky. Like, this is clear as day. I know it's him, and he's sending me this message of the student-teacher relationship. And I'm realizing in real time that I'm not the teacher, I'm the student in this relationship, which makes that bright light more contextual. Like now I know, I'm starting to figure out who he is. And I sit down with this animal communicator, and she validates, we're here for Chucky, and that's who we're going to talk about today. And the first question out of her mouth is, do you know who he is to you? And I said, yeah, he just showed me. And we spent the time talking about what that was.
Wow. Would you say, like, as a kid growing up, it was sort of there, like it just had always been there? Your spiritual teacher told you the tapping just kept getting more intense and intense.
I don't know. I read a lot about folks and their stories, and it's fun for me to read because I'm sort of living through it and or have lived to a certain degree and now in it. But there was never this thing that kept showing up. I don't think so. Not so much. I mean, maybe there was some instances of I knew what animals wanted, but I feel like everyone did. But you had to really pay attention. You had to hold them in certain regard to pay attention. You had to appreciate them with certain regard. So for me that was natural. But looking back at it now, no, people treated them like dumb little things with fur, right? Like that's not as something that's worth taking care of. Not like there's a difference between someone who has a dog and leaves it outside during the wintertime and someone who brings them in, right? Like as a simple example, as a very simple example, right? One has respect for the animal, and one doesn't, and just doesn't care what they're going to find in the morning. I mean, that awareness and that appreciation has always been there, and I think that's a big part of it, is appreciating the thing that's around you, and then you have a different relationship with that thing, be it an animal, be it your mate, be it Mother Nature, whatever you want to have an appreciation with. It changes things. Those dreams were the thing that really, for me, just made things odd and different. And at the time, didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. Like, who would you talk to about it? It just doesn't sound normal, right? So a little bit, but I wouldn't say I always knew. There was always this thing. I don't think about it that way.
Okay. And it makes sense to me that you were looking for that clean answer in the box because that's your SEO mind, right? That's how you operate with that, and you're successful with that.
Yeah, it
Exactly.
has to make sense. It's got to make sense, right? Yeah, and and it sort of doesn't make sense. I mean, I could tell someone how I do what I do, and at the end of it, it's almost like magic. What I'm saying and the experience that I have, like it feels like there's a gap in there. It happens. It happens like electricity. Like we can explain it,
Okay.
but like, do you really know how it works? A lot of us just you go, yeah, of course. You flip on the light. Line that is far from the truth.
Now that you are have a library of animal communicators books, do you find that it's pretty individual? Do you find that there's some commonality between the stories?
I think the commonality that I've seen is the appreciation for the animals. That's what I see. People look at them differently. They look at them as if they're beings having their own experience on the planet like we are. Like we all signed up for something and they signed up to be in these little bodies. We're here to learn and support from each other. There's a mutual respect versus an extraction from.
Okay. I've had some other people on the show, and they also refer to the animal, the pet, being the teacher, that they come here to teach us something. Do you find that that is a thread that's always, or just it depends on the animal and, what they've got on their mind and what their message is?
Yeah, I mean, for folks who show up to my doorstep, so to speak, the ones that I work with, that's always the conversation is what's the lesson you're here to teach the individual. There's a few themes to that. It's typically the now. Now is very important. Like, well, what about where did the animal come from? Like, typically they don't want to talk about it. It's not relevant. It's more relevant like right now. So, for example, and I always ask the question. If the human wants to know the answer, I ask the question, and then the animal gets to decide how, if they want to answer the question, right? And so I've asked the question multiple times, and I've gotten this answer typically. One answer that an animal gave me was when I asked, "What was the home like before?" And the response was, "But this home." Yeah, but the person wants to know about the last home. No, but this home. Okay, so we're going to focus on this home. Got it. Okay. And there was only one time where it was relevant for the human to know the animal's prior experience. And it was because she was wondering, how come the dog behaves like this when I do that? And she was taking it as like, I'm doing something wrong. And the reality was, well, there was trauma tied with that animal. When you had a certain behavior, the animals wasn't reacting to you. It was the trauma that you were observing. And so it was important for her to know that there was trauma tied to it. So we can work through that and change her behavior so she got a different result.
Wow, that's fascinating. Really, you're a medium, but you work with animals. The translator, so
Yeah, I'm the translator. Yeah, that's the deal. Yeah,
just like the
yeah.
lady who worked with you that you originally saw at the psychic fair, really no difference.
Same. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just going to ask because I'm curious, and I'm sure you're going to go, "Oh my God, I can't." I get this question all the time. You have cats, dogs. I have cats, dogs, goats, chickens, all on the farm here. They do all have their own personality, even what appears to be the simplest of them. Sometimes when you watch them, not so simple. Their consciousness, does it feel different, or is it just no different than different iterations of humans?
Does it feel different? I would say the big difference is there's such a straight shooting with the animals. Like it's a very clear conversation. There's no playing games necessarily. Sometimes when you talk to the personality, so there's three aspects of the animal, and you could argue, well, it's the same thing with the human. There's the higher self, there's the body, and then there's the personality. The higher self is pretty darn straight shooting. The personality could be funny and just have a little bit more spice added to it. So for example, I was talking to Chihuahua once, and she was being extremely expressive, and I thought, wow, Chihuahuas, because I've talked to more than one, are just always expressive. And what I heard back was, but I'm pretty. Okay, okay. Now I know I'm talking to the personality, right?
Okay.
And then there's aspects of the body. Like there'll come a time when I'm conversing with the animal, and I'll say, is there anything you want to show me in the body, yours or mine? Like just bring it to my attention. And so I'll get something body wise, or I won't, depending on the conversation.
And I assume it's no different than, again, with a medium where you can reach out to the animal that is either currently embodied or ones that are disembodied.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't ask people if the animal's past or present. It just didn't really occur to me that should be something I should ask. I was talking to a gentleman. It was about his cat, and I told him what I was seeing, and he said, "Well, that was a long time ago." And I was like, "Well, when was that?" "Well, that was 30 years ago." And I was like, "30 years ago? Well, how old is your cat?" Like it wasn't computing for a little bit. He's like, "No, the cat's been gone for 20 years." I was like, "Oh, okay. So that's happening now. Okay, now I'm with you. Got it. Thanks."
Interesting. Is there like a common question you get? And have you had some, like a really unusual kind of request from a client that you would like to share so that people know that all is, it's all safe, right? There is no inbounds or out of bounds, I would guess.
No, there's not that I've come across so far. I mean, and here's how folks typically show up. It's either they're curious and they want to have the conversation, like what will my pet teach me, right? That can certainly show up, and does. And more likely it's someone who shows up because my dog is biting someone, my dog is, doing their business on the floor, my dog is put the other dog in the hospital because they bit them and now they have stitches and now what do I do with these things? So it's very 3D type of problems that show up typically.
Okay.
And here's the surprise thing that happens more often than not. For example, a woman showed up and I always ask people, give me 3 questions. And she had one. Why is my dog biting people? Okay, well, I'll ask. And this was a Chihuahua as well, a lot of Chihuahuas. And I asked the dog. I found the dog, and I said, "So, what's going on? What's with the biting?" And the response I got was, "You need to ask her about her job." Okay, all right. Why am I asking her about her job? Because that's what has to change. Okay, got it. So we get on the line. She says, "Did you find out about the biting? Can you make him stop?" And I said, "Your dog wants to talk about your job. What's going on?" Well, I'm sort of unemployed, but I'm a private driver. Well, what does that mean? Uber, Lyft. Okay. How's it going? Well, I shouldn't be doing it. Why not? Because my doctor said I shouldn't because I have spinal issues. And after about an hour or two driving around, I get very aggravated. My spine's very aggravated. It's very painful. So I shouldn't be doing that. Oh, well, here's what your dog said about your job. It's what has to change. Let's now talk about that. Right. And she was not happy about her job. And when it comes back to why is my dog biting people, animals are typically one of the tools they use is mirroring or modeling behavior. So if you've ever heard someone say, "Man, my dog is so lazy, sits on the couch all day long while I play video games," right? So, oh, got it. Yeah, your dog is the lazy one in this relationship. I'm with you now. My little boy cat, Chucky, he every night between 7 o'clock and 8 at night, he will either be at the top of the stairs waiting or meowing for me, or at the bottom of the stairs waiting typically. And my wife will say, "Your boy's down here. You got to come play with him." But he's waiting to play every night, because I have this relationship with the computer where I will grind through and I'll keep on going. Right? It's too much work. And his lesson to me is you should play. The way that it showed up for the woman who had the biting Chihuahua was, well, I'm angry and I'm biting people. Well, why do you think your dog's angry? And the result is biting people. It seems like you're not happy with your job. We should talk about that. And so that was the conversation.
Wow, that's amazing and that's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Both really good examples.
They're so trippy, that you like, I never know what's going to happen. I never know what I'm going to get. Always something unexpected every time.
Wow. That is great. And what a difference from I'll call it your day job. What a difference
Yeah.
from your day job,
Yeah.
right? It's really does keep your perspective about existence, all existence and consciousness so differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, there was a day, this was a while back at this point, where I was talking with animals and relaying it to humans, and I got off the line, and then I went back almost immediately to the day job. And it was such a rough entry, being sort of like high as a kite, talking with these animals and the humans. Like it's so much fun. And then I'm going back to like just being really focused on reading an email and what's going on here, and is there a problem? What has to happen? And what's the action? And just those two things so close to each other on a timeline was a very unique experience.
I bet. So I would like to shift the conversation over to intuition, but before I do that,
Yeah.
the picture in the background has captured my attention. Can you share a little bit?
I sure can. Yeah, that's my wife's picture. She bought it. She didn't paint it, but I think the artist is Magritte, and the name is The Lovers 2.
Okay.
And that's about all I know about it.
Well, it does grab one's attention, so I thought I would ask.
Fair enough.
So you do work with intuition. Can you tell me a little bit on how you got on that path?
Yeah. So that started around 2017, and it was with the spiritual teacher that I was talking about. And it started with a coaching program. I was working with him with the coaching program, and it was 6 weeks. Then it was another 6 weeks, and he was talking about what he was doing, and he was following my energy and tracking me. And he was talking about this coaching program that he had. It wasn't interesting the first 6 weeks. Then the next 6 weeks was a little interesting, and I asked a little bit about it. And then I said, why don't we focus on the coaching program? I'd love to take you up on it and walk through that for the next 6 weeks. And so he walked me through. His name is David Waldis, and it was Align Living is the system. It's a meditation practice. It helps you stabilize your energy. He taught me how to read someone else's energy. So walking through, lighting up the chakras, the root, sacral, etc., and seeing how people flow through it. And at the end of anything that we're talking about, be it mediumship, being psychic, being talking to animals, you want to call it intuition, whatever broad label you want to add to it. The root of it is really a good meditation that has an aspect of grounding and has an aspect of source, or whatever you want to give that higher level being entity, whatever name you want to give it. And so working with him to understand how that worked, to understand what he was doing with me, I started to do that with some other people loosely, but that's where things started to get really interesting. And before the animals showed up, I started to hear things and see things and more consistently. I mean, and in retrospect, like those things were showing up every once in a while, those taps on the shoulder every once in a while, but
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't contextualize it. And it was a little, sort of weird. And again, didn't really know what to do with it until it became more of a consistent thing. And then I started to work with more people around it. And so what it looks like today is, some people show up and they go, I want to talk to animals. Great. I want a better relationship with my animal. That's cool. Okay. But here's the starting point is we're going to learn the foundation of intuition, the things that help me out. I'm going to share with you and I'm going to walk you through and we'll work through the blocks together. I think personally is that what opens up is what opens up for you. So for example, I have a young lady that I'm working with now who she was looking for a sign. She went onto Instagram. She saw a video that I posted about me being interviewed in Santa Barbara a couple months ago. And she reached out and she said, I just had to contact you. Well, why is that? Well, I'm doing furniture flipping. I do. But what you don't know is I hear a voice. I hear a voice that tells me to go down very specific alleys and I'll find furniture. And I do. Every time I hear the voice, every time I get that nudge, I find furniture. And then I put my hand on the furniture and I start to glean the stories from the furniture. And now I work with furniture and that's how things are showing up for her, right? So her experience isn't animals, her experience isn't beings that have passed, her experience is furniture, right? So it could show up in so many different ways that it's so important to understand that the fundamental is this channel that we can create, and the expectations that you have. If you only want to do it for animals, you could be blinding out everything else,
Mm-hmm.
right?
You know what else is cool about that is furniture has consciousness.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything has
Everything.
consciousness. So it's not just furniture. But as you said that, I thought that's such a great example because a lot of times, again, people have a hard time wrapping their head around that concept that,
Totally.
a rock has consciousness. So I thought, oh, that's a perfect example of something has consciousness because she's reading it.
Yeah, yeah, or an energy signal tied to it, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. I've picked up pieces of paper from people because I just like to see what's on the paper. I don't know why. I just like to see what is it a card? Is it a sale? Is it an advertisement? Whatever. It's that whichever side of the brain, that SEO side of the brain. Like I'm curious about that advertisement, right? That messaging, and I've picked up pieces of paper from people more than once, and I just don't feel good after having picked up that piece of paper. There's a transference that happens sometimes, and it
With
is,
the energy.
yeah, it is not good. So the more sensitive you get to things, we get it so as you develop your intuition, you become more sensitive to everything. And now we get into energy management and also hygiene of that energy. And what does that all mean? Because it's terribly important to do it the right way, or else you're not going to get the result that you want.
Okay. A couple cascading questions off of that.
Yeah.
The first one I'm going to ask you, and I read this. This is something that you have. It says commit to your intuition
Mm.
and use your intuition to commit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I work with people on the three C's, and one is the commitment part. And so folks say they want to develop their intuition, but it's a commitment, right? There's a daily practice to it. There's a longer term commitment to it. So for me, as the example is every day, like clockwork. Largely, the first thing I do in the morning is sit on the same space, my little bench area, and do a meditation for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, depends on the day, but it's typically every day. And then I have office hours for animals. So that's my regular-ish rhythm. There could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but that's the baseline for me. Committing to the space, committing to the time, committing to the relationship that you're building. It's a relationship. It's a relationship with your intuition. It's a relationship with the guides on the other side. You want them to show up. Well, they're expecting you to show up too. So we're building this relationship, right? And so it's not it didn't work, one and done. Well, that's not commitment, right? That's nothing. We live in a society where we can't even drive a car and be focused on the task of driving the car without looking at phones, without being distracted by things, right? So commitment is not a thing that's prevalent in our society these days.
Fact. That's a big strategy, just having that time set up in the morning that you do that. What are a couple other strategies that you could throw out there for people who are going to dip their toe in it, but those who want to be a little more serious, knowing that there's more to this?
Well, we'll go through the other C's, coincidences, which there are none. There are no coincidences, right? So I mentioned Santa Barbara. So we drive up there, and on the way going up there, I'm thinking, is this what I should be doing with my time? Should I be getting in front of people talking to animals? I don't know. And it's sort of a fleeting thought. It's a 4-hour drive to get there. And we get to the Airbnb in Santa Barbara. I pull into the back parking lot. It's a multi-level unit that we're staying in. It's a big house that's been chopped up. And we pull into the back, and we're in this big parking lot, and I start counting the parking signs, number 1, 2, 3, etc. And I'm like, oh, we're 10. Oh, 9, 10, and 11. They're basically like in a barn. It's not open. It's not open parking lot. It's in a barn. I'm like, that's a very tight door. Like, this car is never going to fit in there. But I want to give it a shot. I used to valet park cars. I like getting cars into tight spaces. So it's a fun thing for me.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge, right? So I get in there, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I try to get out. I can't get out. And, I get the car back out, and I'm thinking $1,000 for 3 days, like, and parking was included. Now I'm parking on the street. I'm a little irritated with this, right? We park on the street. My wife's with me. Park on the street, get our stuff, bring it upstairs. And I'm preparing to go to this event that I'm speaking at in about an hour and a half or so. And looking for a place to go eat on the phone. And I see this little spider just dripping down my head. And I'm like, let me get you and just usher you outside. Still a little irritated, but not what I was 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. We get outside. We have to drive to the main street, State Street in Santa Barbara to get some food. We're walking to the car. At the rear of the bumper, there's this little feather sitting there. I just pick it up and bring it inside and show my wife, Julietta, to show it to her, and I put her down. And then we get to State Street, we park the car, and as we're walking to the restaurant, we walk by this little sign that says Cat Cafe. It was a sign for this little a cat cafe. I think it actually said cat therapy, and it was a sign for a cat cafe, which was down the alleyway. And I was like, huh. So within an hour of being in Santa Barbara, I parked in a barn, unsuccessfully, but still, pulled a little spider off me, found a little feather at the rear of my bumper. We walked by a sign that said cat therapy. Am I in the right place to be talking about animals? I think so. Right? But if I wasn't open to synchronicity versus everything's a coincidence, I could have just stayed mad about the parking spot. Just been irritated about the spider. Never even seen the sign of the feather or the sign for the cat therapy, cat cafe store. Just been in my own muck, just being mad about $1,000 in 3 days, right? I could have easily stayed in that, but I wasn't. And so I started to see the synchronicities versus maybe a coincidence or two.
Or 3 or 4.
You're right, as many as you need for that, right? And they keep on showing up. So once you can distinguish between coincidences and synchronicities, it starts to show up. And for a lot of folks, I mean, this is the easy example that I give is, have you ever thought someone was going to call and then they magically called? Or magically text, or have you called someone and they go, oh my God, I was just thinking about you, right? It's happened more than once for folks. And that is at the very basic level what I'm talking about. It's this connection that we have a chance to build on. But if we just go, oh my God, that was so weird, there's nothing to build on with weird, but there's something to build on when we recognize the connection and we want to do something about it.
Okay. So we have commitment, coincidence. What's the third C?
Yeah, the third C is the channel. Is no expectations. There's what you get really is what you get, right? And so that's why when I'm teaching intuition, but I want to have this experience. And I have a gentleman who showed up, and he essentially got a visitation from his father, and he gets shot into outer space, and then he comes back and he says, I want to have that experience again. Okay, well, tell me why. Because it was fantastic. All right. Well, we're going to work on having like experiences, because here's why. If we're looking at the world through this little hole in a piece of paper, all we see is what we see through that little hole. But when we remove the paper, we can get a broader, wider, greater experience. So we're gonna take those expectations, throw them out the window, and just work on being open to whatever wants to show up. And you're going to be surprised what that is. Sure enough, one session down, he's like, "Yep, now I know what you're talking about. All right, appreciate it." So removing those obstacles, and we're really good, and I was really good, and still am, at taking an obstacle, manufacturing an obstacle, and putting it right in your way.
Boy, yes, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
That and being attached to the outcome.
Totally right. Which is that expectation, right? But it has to work out like this. Well, why does it have to work out that way? Because that's what I want. Okay. Well, you can grind and you can sacrifice to get that thing you want, and it just may not be worth it versus the best result for the situation for yourself at this point in time.
These are like just great, real examples. I love them. A couple of techniques or strategies that you would throw out there for folks?
Yeah, I would say I would go back to the commitment piece. It all starts with the commitment.
Start at the beginning.
Absolutely, 100%. Find a meditation that works, something with grounding, something with opening up the crown, and some of them are better than others because there's a stabilization aspect to it that a lot of them I find do not have. And people, it really is easier to sit with someone and learn the techniques versus going on YouTube. It's helpful for sure. And I've heard this from multiple people. There's a difference. The gentleman I just got off the line with him before we got on, and I asked, did you do the homework? Which was sit down and meditate. Essentially, that was the homework. Yeah, I did, but it's different than it is with you. Well, tell me why. Because it's easier. I get more of the experience. It happens faster. So those things are certainly part of the experience of working with someone who can guide you through it. It's like sports athletes. They're at the top of the game and they still have a coach, right? I mean, they still have someone to mentor them through to tweak how they stand, how they swing the bat, how they throw the ball, or whatever sport we're talking about. But it's just simply easier when you have this independent party watching you and helping you out. And this is very similar.
Okay, what, when you said that, I thought, because, I enjoy my sports, and I thought, well, yeah, actually, you're right. They do still have a coach, not trying to figure it all out on their own. So how would you use your intuition and these techniques to leverage decision making?
Yeah. So a lot of us, as you said, we get attached to that outcome. We really want that thing, right? And sometimes we get hung up on it and we get blind to that wish, that desire, that want for whatever reason. Part of the process of tuning in and disconnecting from those expectations is finding that next right action for whatever the best purpose is, best outcome is for us, which may not be the thing that we quote unquote really, really want. It may not serve us.
Yeah, I found that out personally when I let go of things, is really what I wanted wasn't in my best interest, or there was a lot better out there. And I didn't trust.
Yeah.
These are things that even with my imagination, I wouldn't have thought of, but that was brought to me because I let go of it. And I think it's hard to let go and realize that there's a whole lot out there that knows a whole lot more than we do.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, the full-time work with SEO through the years and working in corporate has been training for, it shows the opposite side of that coin, which is, when you get your annual review and then and tell me about your goals for the year, they're completely 100% arbitrary.
Yeah.
We're going to double the thing. How? Why? Why do we possibly think we can do that? Well, because you doubled it last year or you came close. It just doesn't make any sense. They're completely arbitrary. How about we just do the best we can, right? And that's a little too loose. We need to put some parameters around it. But on the opposite side of that conversation is really tuning into the thing that is best for us right now and just moving down the path. If we're on the right path, it's sort of hard to make a mistake. There's learnings along the way, but when you're on the right path, you're on the right path versus being way over here and making mistakes, and none of them even matter because you're just simply not going in the right direction.
So have you done any group work on the corporate level, or you just keep that separate?
Not at this point. Not at this point. That's on the list of things to do, but I haven't quite got there yet.
It's coming and we're going to get there. You see little glimmers of different corporations or smaller businesses entertaining the thought. I don't always feel like
Yeah,
I don't always feel like they're truly committed, your big C word, to it, but
yeah,
just acknowledging, entertaining, and bringing people in the door, I'll take as a win, and then see where that goes. So
yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think there's a whole lot of empty at the end of a lot of corporate goals. Like we did a thing, and now what?
yeah.
What was the purpose? What was the meaning other than we set out to do it?
So what's next for you?
Yeah, I want to talk to as many animals as possible. That's my goal, and talk to the humans about their animals. And for folks, if that's not in alignment, if they don't have an animal they want to talk to, and it's more interesting to develop their own intuition, that is the second thing that I want to do is work with those folks.
So how would that look like for someone who's listening to the show? How would that look like for them, and how would they get a hold of you to do that?
Yeah, yeah. So they can go to the website nickmusica.com, nickmusica.com. You can follow me on Instagram, which is a new and exciting thing. I'm working on it. But the handle is My Cat Schooled Me for obvious reasons. There's options on the website to get a reading for your animal or to sign up for a one-time develop your intuition. And the animal readings are typically one and done. Sometimes there's follow-ups, but there's action items that come out of it, right? It's like anything else. As we move down the path, something else may show up for sure. But for a lot of folks, it's okay, I got what I needed, and now I'm moving through. The intuition's a little different. The intuition is establishing a baseline and understanding what is good for this individual, and then working with them on their goals for that. And so that's typically 4 to 6 weeks working with those folks. And for some folks who are in business, I run an assessment. It's called a Harrison assessment. It's 175 characteristics that you will stack rank. And at the end of it, it's a 40-ish page report that gives you your preferences, most preferred to least preferred. And you really get to see it's amazing. It's such a great tool. You get to see your personal operating system in black and white, well, blue, a lot of blue, but it's your behavioral traits where you prefer to do this action versus this action, and then what does that look like under stress? So you can see what you're producing under stress versus not. So one easy example is there's paradoxes, this and that, and so two characteristics to pull from a behavior. So a lot of folks may be overly diplomatic, and they don't clearly communicate what they want because they're sort of dancing around what they want. And there's other folks who are overly frank, which comes off very harsh. And it's like, oh my God, I don't even care what they want. It was just communicated in such a way that I can't even take that message in. So, if you have a 7, 1 out of 10 is the scale. If you have a 7 for diplomacy and 7 for frankness, you can pull from each one depending on how you need to communicate your message, as a simple example.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I love it, and I can see where that would facilitate a big difference in the personality of the organization.
Yeah, it's enormous. Oh my goodness, yeah. And so and you can run it against teams, right? So if everyone in leadership, for example, is overly diplomatic, as again, random example, is anything really getting done? Probably not. Or if everyone is overly frank, do you think everyone who is a subordinate thinks that leadership is harsh? Probably. So now we can get into EQ conversations. We can get into ways of communication. Like there's a way bigger conversation around it.
Wow, that's great. I love it. And I love that that's on the horizon, more to come. So any last thoughts that you'd like to leave for the listeners?
I think we covered a lot, Sandra. I think we did pretty well.
So, Nick, I thank you for being here. This has been an amazing conversation. Certainly, this one's going to leave me with a lot to ponder. I also want to thank Chucky, who is there in the background, but energetically there. And I also listened to the message that Chucky gave you
Yeah,
that I think is important for a lot of people, that we need to take some time out and play. He schooled you and he continues to school you with that, doesn't he?
it's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
I tend to get corrections from him. He's very helpful.
I love it. I'm gonna. I pay attention to my animals too. I do. I know they communicate and they tell me things, and we have conversations. And
Cool.
People can think what they may of them. I'm letting go of the I'm worried about being judged with it, so it is what it is.
They're gonna think what they want anyway.
That's points and a good point. And I also want to take time to thank all the listeners who take time out of their day to join us and listen to us with the show. And I want to remind everyone, embrace that wild soul. Until next time, thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.